Chapter 24. Hope is a dangerous thing. I had let myself fly high on hope, let it start to thaw the ice within, and so the fall and the pain were greater for it. My cursed mind made the connection, even in the fraction of a second it took me to turn back towards the house. I had been so foolish, so stupid, to believe that since we made Bella healthier, she was somehow safer. The thing inside Bella took its strength from her, damned creature that it was, and with the healing power of the blood, its strength had grown exponentially, to a level that could only destroy Bella more. In helping her, we hurt her. I moved swiftly into the house, through the panicked thoughts of my family, beyond the sound of Bella's cry of pain, and the echo of the bone cracking. She was bent forward on the bed, Rosalie supporting her, breathing roughly through her clenched teeth. Carlyle and I leaned over her, listening intently for signs of damage, bleeding, or further breakage. My God, how quickly could we get it out if it started to destroy her now? I could hear the rough movement near her ribs, the sound of bone moving against itself. Fractured rib, thought Carlyle. He put a hand on Bella's side, but she brushed it away lightly. "Give me a second, Carlyle," she said, her breath coming short and fast. The bones cracked again, and Carlyle hissed with anxiety. "Bella," he said quickly, "I heard something crack. I need to take a look." "Pretty sure it was a rib." Bella moved slightly, and she sucked in a quick breath of pain. "Oh, yeah, right here." She gestured to her side. Carlyle touched her shoulder. "I need to take an X-ray. There might be splinters. We don't want it to puncture anything." His mind painted a picture of the inside of Bella's body, all the soft tissue, and the small, delicate organs at risk, that she could be even more fragile on the inside than the outside, a frail shell encasing the ethereal mechanisms of life. Bella pulled in a breath. "Okay," she said. Rosalie, who already had her arm behind her, gently slid her arm under Bella's knees. I moved forward, uncertain if Rosalie could control her natural strength enough not to jostle Bella needlessly. Rosalie caught my movement and grimaced. "I've already got her," she growled. I locked my teeth and followed her and Carlyle up the stairs. We passed Alice, who staggered a little against the banister. With Bella's cry, she had thrown her entire mind towards Bella's future, and the strain was searing her head with pain and guilt. She wanted to follow, to comfort Bella, but she just couldn't. "I'm sorry, Edward," she thought, walking slowly down the stairs. The office was empty now. Emmett and Jasper had fled to the third floor after hearing Bella's cry, fearful of an injury that might have resulted in blood. They were skittish, nervous after the incident with the IV. Rosalie lay Bella gently on the table, and Carlyle ran the X-ray machine over her. We waited in silence for the results. "Well," Bella laughed softly, breaking the quiet, "it seems he's definitely feeling better." Rosalie smiled and gripped Bella's hand. Bella's eyes moved to mine, but I couldn't imagine that even she harbored the idea that I would be happy about this. I brushed the hair gently from her face. Carlyle stared silently at the X-ray for a few moments. "Yes, fractured rib," he thought soberly. Finally, his eyes rose up and locked with Bella's. He regarded her for a long moment. "Bella," he said finally. His voice was quiet, serious. All traces of the smile left Bella's face. "Don't even start with me, Carlyle," she said firmly. Her eyes flickered to me. "Either of you. We are not having the same discussion again." "No," said Carlyle. "What I want to discuss, Bella, is that I think we may have reached an adequate level of development. There is now the possibility of delivering the baby early, before its strength can grow dangerous to you. More dangerous." Bella sighed. "I want to wait until it's definitely safe for him," Bella said. "Until we are sure he is ready." I hissed quietly, and Bella glanced at me. He would show he was ready by tearing himself out of her, and I was not waiting for that. "Even human babies can survive at what seems to be his approximate level of development," Carlyle pressed. "They survive at fancy human hospitals," said Rosalie. "We don't know enough about him. We don't even know if your calculations are correct, if they are the same as for a normal human baby." if he will be strong enough to survive outside the womb." My temper flared at my irritation that none of this conversation seemed to consider if Bella would be strong enough to survive. "If it's strong enough to do this," I snapped, grabbing the X-ray of Bella's fractured rib out of Carlyle's hand and shaking it violently, "then it's strong enough to live on its own, whatever it is." Bella drew in a quick breath. "Whatever it is?" she echoed softly, looking at me. "Real nice, Edward," Rosalie thought in disgust. I felt the familiar rush of remorse and bit back more bitter words, because suddenly I was filled with bitterness. I hated that this was happening. With the sound of Bella's bone cracking, hope had been violently ripped from me, leaving a gaping hole that quickly filled with bitter anger. "Edward," Esme said, a little sharply. She turned to Bella. "Maybe you should consider the early delivery." But both Bella and Rosalie were shaking their heads now. "No," Bella said, biting her lip. "I agree with Rose. We just don't know, and I don't want to take the risk." My face hardened at these words, and she quickly revised them. "A risk with him, I mean." She pressed her lips together and looked down. There was silence as Carlyle carefully taped Bella's rib up. He took out her IV, and that cheered her up. I thought she was annoyed with me, but when it was time to go back down, she reached her arms out to me, and I carefully picked her up and brought her downstairs. I paused for a moment in surprise at the bottom of the stairs. Alice was curled up on the floor next to a sleeping Jacob. Her mind was very empty, and she was enjoying the temporary peace. I put Bella gently onto the couch and knelt down beside her. Rosalie came down and stood behind the couch, staring at Alice. "Ugh, how can she stand it?" Rosalie thought. "That's gross, Alice," she muttered. "Shut up, Rose," Alice murmured back, not opening her eyes. After another cup of blood and 2 trips to the bathroom, Bella eventually drifted off to sleep, her warm hand clasped in mine. Suddenly, there was a sharp hiss from the top of the stairs. Jasper had appeared and was staring down at Alice on the floor by Jacob in annoyed shock. "Alice, get away from him," Jasper said in a low voice. Alice didn't move, ignoring him. Jasper was down the stairs in a flash, standing over Alice. "Alice, please," he said more loudly. "Jasper," Alice moaned, not opening her eyes. "My head feels so much better when I'm so close to him. It's empty. I can't see anything. It's heaven." Jasper growled low. "That's probably because your future is so uncertain when you're that near to him," he said in a hard voice. Alice opened one eye and regarded him. "You think so?" she murmured. "Maybe." She closed her eyes. "I'll take the risk." "I won't," snapped Jasper. "I don't want you lying so close to him." "Jealous?" Alice laughed softly. "Back off, Jasper." Jasper continued to stand over her, mouth in a thin line, arms crossed. Alice sighed. "Go away, Jasper." "No." "Fine," she groaned, rolling away from him and even closer to Jacob. Jasper's teeth clenched. He was determined to stand guard over her for as long as necessary. Considering how much Alice was enjoying Jacob's effect on her mind, I imagined it would be a while. Emmett came downstairs and sat in one of the chairs, pulling Rosalie onto his lap and whining in her ear for a while about how they were never alone anymore, until she finally, thankfully, told him to shut up. As the dusk deepened, I heard the mental call. "Edward? Oh, Edward?" Seth's voice sang in my head. "It's just me coming. Please don't let your brothers kill me. That wouldn't be good." I grimaced. No, it wouldn't. "It's just Seth coming," I said quietly, and heard understanding in my family's minds. Seth was coming to check on Jacob, who had never phased back. Seth's large footfalls grew steadily louder, and I heard him enter the yard, and then pause, uncertain. "I don't have any clothes," Seth realized. I watched the memory in his head. He had been so anxious to share the news with the pack when he found out about Charlie's call. He had phased without changing, willing to sacrifice the ratty sweatpants he had been wearing, never realizing, of course, that he would not be returning home. I felt the small twist of pain in his heart at this thought. Edward," Seth thought, "unless you want me to come in there naked." I stood up and went over to the window and gave Seth a short wave. I went quickly upstairs and retrieved a set of clothes from Jasper's room. I went downstairs and, stepping around Jacob, brought the clothes outside and set them at the edge of the woods next to Seth. "Thanks, man," Seth thought, picking them up gingerly in his mouth and trotting away. I went back into the house, kneeling next to Bella on the couch. She was still asleep. I heard Jasper sigh, and then he reached down suddenly, wrapped an arm around Alice's waist, and pulled her easily up and across the room. 2 wolves were too much for him. Seth appeared in the front door a few seconds later. He looked down at Jacob, curled up in human form on the floor, and snorted. "Good to see you, old fearless leader," Seth said, stepping over Jacob's head into the room. He looked around. "Thanks for the clothes, Edward," he said carefully. "They fit great. But I've got to tell you, they reek something awful." He smiled, and then walked over to the nearest chair and sprawled out in it. "Great," thought Rosalie, glaring at him. "Now we're stuck with another one." "Seth," said Esme, "I'll wash some fresh clothes for you and put them on the front porch for next time. And your sister as well," she thought. Seth's smile grew even wider. "Thanks, Mrs. C," he said brightly. Emmett chuckled loudly, and Rosalie elbowed him in the ribs. Esme bit her lip not to laugh. "Seth, you can call me Esme," she said gently. "Sure," Seth said quietly. He was looking at me now. "God, Edward looks awful," he thought. "He thinks this is his fault. He takes it all on himself." He had seen the images of me in Jacob's memories, my burning face, my figure, prostrate on the ground in my grief and guilt. He had been shaken by that, and the vision lingered now, sending a shudder through both of us. He had also seen the agreement between Jacob and me in the event of Bella's death, and he was determined to prevent it. He reached out and placed a large, warm hand on my shoulder. "How are you doing, Edward?" he asked quietly. All eyes in the room swung towards me. I glanced at him, feeling awkward. "I'm managing, Seth," I murmured. He held my eyes for a moment. They reflected coal black in his. "Just know that I'm here for you, man, no matter what happens." He patted my shoulder a couple of times, his weight and strength so different from Bella's human touch, heat radiating off him like a flame. "Thanks," I said softly. Seth leaned back in the chair, looking away, but I kept watching him. He really meant it. His heart and mind were a simple, unclouded tableau of concern for me and everyone involved. He was good, like Bella. I had met Seth's mother at the wedding, and while she was a good person as well, strong and fierce, I saw much more of her in Leah than in Seth. I wondered what his father had been like, and I wish I could have met him. But the most incredible thing, the fact that held a small place inside me and steadied me with its own warm, glowing weight, was that Seth was my friend. He cared about me. Suddenly, the phone rang in the next room. Damn it, I thought. Only one person called our house phone. "Esme, quick," I whispered, and she flew toward the kitchen, but it was too late. Bella's eyes were open. "Is that Charlie?" she asked, a little breathlessly. "I want to talk to him." "Love," I whispered, "go back to sleep." But she shook her head. "Esme," she called. "If that's Charlie, will you bring me the phone, please?" Esme brought the portable phone to Bella, an unhappy look on her face. Bella took the phone and began a murmured conversation with Charlie. She laughed, assuring him that she was being well taken care of, that she was lucky to have her own full-time doctor hovering over her constantly. I felt a flash of rare irritation from Seth, and I glanced at him. "Is it a good idea for her to be talking to Charlie?" Seth wondered. "Won't it just make things harder for both of them, later?" My jaw locked, and I shrugged stiffly. What could I do? Seth leaned closer. "Not that I want you guys to leave, Edward," he said softly. "But have you considered taking Bella away from Forks? Away from the danger of the rest of the pack?" I shook my head. "Carlisle has too many medical connections here to give up," I replied. I glanced at Bella and touched her thin wrist with my finger. She looked up at me and smiled, the phone still against her face. I turned back to Seth. "And Bella, she's just so weak." Seth nodded and looked at Bella, really taking in her physical decline for the first time. I heard the crack then, so much louder this time than the last. An alarm registered on Seth's face, as I saw through his mind a sudden burst of agony rip through Bella's pale expression. I twisted back to her, as she said in a choked voice, "Charlie, I've gotta go," and dropped the phone with a bang. Immediately, Bella hunched over her stomach, and then a small strangled cry fell from her lips as she arched backwards, teeth clenched, clutching her side. Seth leapt to his feet. "What is it?" he cried. "Carlyle," I hissed. I wrapped my arms around Bella, and she pressed her face into my shoulder. Her muscles felt tight, rigid against the pain. Rosalie knelt next to me. Carlyle arrived immediately. "It's broken something," I said desperately, looking up at Carlyle, Bella still in my arms. "I heard the crack." "Probably another rib," he murmured. "Another rib?" said Seth in shock. "Geez, Bella, that's not good." Bella opened her eyes slightly to glare at him. I picked Bella up gently and carried her upstairs behind Carlyle. She was still breathing hard. Rosalie, Esme, and Seth followed. "Don't let him upstairs," Jasper thought angrily. I didn't acknowledge him. I wasn't going to exclude Seth from what was going on, to maintain some sort of strategical advantage over the wolves in our house, and Seth was our ally. It was silent in the room as Carlyle took another X-ray to confirm the broken bone, and then began to tape up the rib. Bella lay quiet, her head back on the table, looking at the ceiling. Rosalie was irritated, thinking our grim expressions were upsetting Bella needlessly. She leaned over Bella, gently stroking her forehead. "It's all right," she said. "Sometimes even normal babies break their mother's ribs." I looked at Rosalie with undistinguished fury. What she said was true, and it didn't have a damn thing to do with what was going on here. A broken rib was extreme for a human fetus, and only the beginning for this one. I caught Seth's worried expression. He saw me looking at him and stepped into the hallway. I knew he was getting anxious to leave, concerned for his sister being alone on patrol. I followed him out. "I'm going to take off," he said quietly. "Run patrol with Leah and let Jake sleep. He needs it." He studied me for a moment. "She's going to be okay, Edward." He smiled and loped down the stairs. I turned away, feeling nothing but a stinging emptiness, and went back to the office. I kissed Bella and then picked her up, cradling her in my arms, and then brought her up the stairs towards the bedroom. "I need a new shirt," Bella moaned. "This one could walk on its own." I tried to laugh. "I'll help you change," I said quietly. We went into the bedroom, and I shoved the door silently shut behind us with my foot, right in Rosalie's face. She fumed outside, but Esme lay a hand on her shoulder, and she didn't come in. I placed Bella carefully on the bed, and then went over to the pile of shirts Alice had collected for Bella. I looked through, and pulled out a soft, dark blue shirt, one of Jasper's, I thought. I climbed onto the bed behind Bella. "Let's get this off of you," I murmured, gently lifting the shirt and helping her pull her arms out. Bella winced in pain, and I froze. "Keep going," she sighed. "I feel like a baby being changed like this, and I definitely want to take a shower tomorrow. I must stink." I chuckled quietly. "You smell perfect as always," I assured her. Between Jacob and Seth, the smell of werewolf had begun to permeate the entire house. No human body odor could compete with that stench. I tossed Bella's old t-shirt onto the floor, and without thinking, my hand reached forward and caressed down the satin skin of her naked back. She was so pale, paler than normal, and yet she seemed to glow in the moonlight. Bella sighed at my touch. I leaned over and pressed my lips against her bare skin. She shivered slightly, and it felt like the flutter of a million tiny wings against my lips. I picked up the new shirt and pulled it gently over her head. She pushed her arms through, and then leaned back against my body. She reached one arm around and laid her hand on the back of my neck, and then turned her head, craning slightly. I leaned around and kissed her lips. I felt her shift uncomfortably, and realized her ribs must be hurting her. Aggravated by my thoughtlessness, I helped her lay down in bed, and then went to get her a new cup of blood. Carlyle handed it to me. "When Bella is asleep," he thought, "come and see me. I want to talk to you." I nodded wordlessly and brought the cup to Bella. She was already in a restless sleep. I placed it on the table we had set up next to the bed and went back to Carlyle's office. He was standing by the exam table, Bella's latest x-ray in his hand. He looked up at me as I came in. "When Jacob wakes up," he said, "I'm going to talk to him about a hunting trip. It's long overdue, as I know you are aware. I would like to purchase some more blood for Bella as well." "Will it be safe?" I asked. "That's what I'm going to ask Jacob," he sighed. "And when I return, you and I will need to seriously discuss and prepare for the delivery, and the change." His face was calm and set. A low growl rose from within me. "Damn it, Carlyle! Is there no way to stop this?" I turned and slammed my fist into the wall, driving straight through to the other side. I was immediately angry with myself. Childish. I pulled my hand out slowly, leaving a ragged hole. Esme will be mad. I turned back to Carlyle. "If I can just get her to change her mind, maybe I can get Jacob to talk to her again." Carlyle bent his head to one side, looking quizzically at me. "Jacob?" "I asked Jacob to give Bella the option of a child with him, a human child, and end this disaster," I said bluntly. Carlyle stared at me silently, slightly shocked. "You can't possibly want that, Edward." "It doesn't matter what I want," I breathed. "Yes, it does," said Carlyle quietly. "Well, what I want is for Bella to live, however possible." My voice was strained. "Live and stay human." "But Edward," Carlyle thought, "it's beyond that now. The fetus is very strong, and Bella—" He trailed off, looking down at the x-ray. "There might be a chance, though," I pressed. Carlyle looked at me sharply. "Edward," he spoke aloud suddenly. He placed the x-ray on the desk and reached up to grip my shoulders with his hands, his eyes fierce. "I need to know that you understand there's little chance she will make it through this as a human, however or whenever it happens." "I know that, Carlyle," I sighed. He gripped me harder and shook me slightly, eyes still intent on mine. "No, Edward, I'm not sure that you do." His voice was anxious. "I see the doubt in your eyes, and this situation will balance too much on the edge of a knife for there to be any doubt. When the birth happens, and I make the call that she cannot survive human, that it is time to change her, there can be no argument. We must be able to act immediately, without delay or discussion or second-guessing. Will you be able to do that, Edward?" I was frozen, taken aback by his sudden intensity. I never wanted it to be this way for Bella. I wanted her to have a choice, not to be forced into it by my actions, by things she had no control over." Carlyle's hand released me, but his eyes did not. "This is her choice, Edward. She made this choice time and time again. Since she found out about the pregnancy, she has never wavered, not even for a moment. We have explained in every possible way the consequences, and she has now lived through many of them, and still she chooses to continue. There is no doubt on her part." "I understand," I said softly. "The doubt came from me. I was the weak link, but I had to be sure. I want to talk to Bella again about it, about changing her mind. I know she understands, but I want to hear it from her." "And you should," Carlyle said firmly. "I will need your strength, Edward, when the time comes. I will need you by my side, 100% focused, if we are going to get her through this." I nodded and turned silently. I walked slowly back up the stairs to the bedroom. I just couldn't believe that there was no other way than to just wait for it to rip the life from Bella, while we ripped out her soul. That it was, as ever, too late. I went into the bedroom and started towards the bed. I would allow myself to lay down with Bella for a while, to hold her in my arms, imagine we were still in her small bed in Charlie's house, and that I would hold her all night, and the dawn would still be filled with hope.
"You're a jackass."
Rosalie hurled her thoughts at me from the other side of the room. I altered my course seamlessly, moving instead until I stood directly in front of her. She was by the window, the moon reflecting off her hair. both golden in the night. "What is your problem, Rosalie?" I hissed.
I heard you talking to Carlyle,
she whispered.
If I can just get Bella to change her mind.
She repeated my earlier words to Carlyle back to me in a mocking tone.
You are just never going to get it, are you, Edward?
Get it? I snapped. Get what? That the thing is going to kill her in the end? My God, Rosalie, it's breaking her bones now. Do you get that? Do you know what it feels like for her? Do you even remember human pain? Rosalie's reaction to my words was instantaneous. Her entire body became rigid steel. She moved closer to me, very slowly, and pressed one long finger against my chest.
You dare ask me if I remember human pain?
Rosalie snarled in a low voice. Her eyes glinted with her fury, black oxy in the night.
If I remember the feel of broken bones, the feel of being battered inside as well as out?
I started to speak, but her finger moved up to my mouth, pressing it shut.
I know more about human pain than you can ever imagine, Edward.
She threw the image at me, even though she knew I hated it, even though it hurt us both. The cool, dark street at night, the sounds of a human body being intentionally, irreversibly damaged, the faces of the men looking down on Rosalie, the pain as they... I clenched my teeth together, trying to block the image out. I pushed her hand away from my face. "Stop it," I hissed.
Do you think I would wish that kind of pain on Bella?
She said in a low, fierce voice.
That I would wish even a fraction of it on her?
Then why, Rosalie? Why? I moaned. Why are you helping her with this?
Because this isn't about what I want,
she said quietly.
It's about what Bella wants.
Don't even, I growled. Her face hardened, and she threw her arms up slightly in submission.
Fine,
she snapped.
I know you can see inside me, that you're rooting around in my head, as always. Yes, I have my own reasons, and you know them damn well, for wanting to help her. But it doesn't really matter what our motives are. Bella and I have the same purpose, the same goal, to bring this child safely to life. Can't you see that?
Anger boiled inside me, turbulent, a bitter, seething pool of resentment and fear. Rosalie, imagine if Emmett had some reckless plan, a plan that would almost certainly destroy him, and instead of trying to stop it, I helped him, supported him, to my own ends. Think how you would feel. My voice dropped, low and rough. Think how much you would hate me. Rosalie became very still, and stared at me for a long moment.
I'll take your hate then, Edward, if that's how you truly feel. But this is different, and you know it. Why can't you see the connection Bella already has with him?
I shook my head against her words. That connection was killing Bella.
I refuse to believe that I'm wrong in supporting Bella,
Rosalie said firmly.
You're wrong, Edward, for not trusting her, for not even wanting your own baby.
Air froze in my throat. These words cut me deep and quick, cut me in a place I wasn't sure I knew existed, somewhere inside me that I wouldn't acknowledge. I pushed it away. Baby, I growled. I'm sick of that word, and sick of the charade. I grabbed Rosalie's arm roughly and turned her towards the bed, where Bella lay sleeping, her midsection bulging out unnaturally after only weeks, just weeks, of carrying the thing. What do you think it is, Rosalie? I snarled, shaking her. Don't give me crap about a baby. She's been pregnant just weeks, and look at her. Look at the size of her. Look at what it's doing to her. What do you think it is? What? The world disappeared for a moment, behind black and red stars of fury and desperation. I shook myself out of it roughly, and then realized I was still shaking Rosalie. She wasn't resisting. I stopped, and she ripped her arm out of my hand, turning towards me.
Bastard,
she thought. Tell me, I growled. Tell me.
I don't know, okay?
She hissed, her hand coming up and striking me in the chest, sending me back a couple of inches.
I don't know.
Her hand came up to hit me again, and I braced myself, reaching to grab her wrist with my hand, but the blow didn't come. Suddenly, silence rang in my ears. Rosalie's face relaxed and went strangely blank. I felt my arm grow warm and heavy, and I lowered it. The air in the room seemed to thicken. grow still. I realized I didn't feel mad at Rosalie anymore. Conversely, I felt something else, like affection tinged with sadness. With effort, I turned my head towards the door. Esme was standing a few feet into the room. Jasper was behind her, his hand on her back, channeling her love, her affection for us, into everyone in the room, within a thick blanket of calm. I heard Bella breathe in deeply and exhale in a sigh, shifting in her sleep.
"Stop it,"
Esme whispered.
"Stop hurting each other."
She took a step away from Jasper, towards us.
"She doesn't have the answer to your question, Edward,"
she said very gently.
"None of us do. All we know is that Bella loves him."
Her face was so sincere, and yet I wanted to roar with fury and frustration. I felt like I was up against a brick wall, and I kept smashing into it again and again. I couldn't break it down. I couldn't get around it. Everything I'd ever wanted was on the other side, but no one could hear me. No one could see me trying to get through. Jasper hissed, annoyed that he had lost control of my mood. "Don't fight me, Edward," he thought. He drove deep down into himself. Given his gift, Jasper had perfected over the years the ability to find the emotion he needed within his mind. Now he searched for his center of calm, and as it rose up and took him, it flooded out into everyone in the room, smothering all the emotions in a thick weight of peace that simultaneously held us down and made us float. I watched Rosalie's eyes close, and then mine closed as well. We didn't fight it. Perhaps we all needed a moment of escape, away from the anger, from the fear. I let the calm carry me, cresting, then falling, and then floating up again. I felt Jasper begin to pull away, like a wave that crashes onto the shore, obliterating and carrying everything in its wake, and then slowly recedes, leaving behind the harsh grains of life. I could not hold back the tide any more. I opened my eyes to reality. The brick wall remained.